My name is Joey. I am the R&D engineer at AEA Ribbon Microphones, which is how I got acquainted with Fred Forssell. Fred, Fred is a circuit designer, had a long stint in rock and roll, and then got into audio design, making preamps, converters, and other fun electronics. And that's how we met. And now we're here to discuss. We'll see.
We'll see where it goes.
Let's start out for the uninitiated. How did you get your start in electronics?
Well, as you alluded to, it was in music. I started off in the early '70s doing light shows. In the '60s actually doing light shows for rock and roll shows, and then discovered for myself really fast what I loved about live performances was the audio side of it. Wasn't as concerned about the aesthetics of how the performers looked on the stage as much as I was how it sounded. So I started becoming interested in that, and back in the mid '60s, it was pretty primitive, and so there was a lot of room for improvement and a lot of room for developing and expanding, and a lot of room for me as a young person to learn how to improve and expand these systems and make the experience of what was being played on stage, transmit out into an audience of thousands and instead of tens. Mm-hmm. So how do you do that and make the audience experience be really what you've experienced watching the bands rehearse or things like that? And so for me, that was where I started. And the first things that I did, not as a lead person, but participated in, was designing PA systems in the late '60s and the early '70s. And one of my mentors, a guy named Jeff Cook, was very, very good at sound system design. He had a great vision for how to do that kind of thing. And I was able to ride in and, do a lot of the hands-on work, of the things that he was conceptualizing, like wouldn't make Jeff sit there and solder a 16-channel snake. I would do that. And he would be working on the speaker design. And so we really complemented each other, but he was just such a knowledgeable guy and had such a great vision and cared so much for how it how things sounded, that he really imparted those values in me as being core values for decision making in the system. And so we made a lot of really impractical PAs. It was a lot of work to set them up, but when they were set up, they sounded really good. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how I started, and then it just evolved from there over time. Mm-hmm. Nice. You have to understand how these systems connect and how they work in the real world if you're going to ever get involved in the design of or the refinement of a single component within the system, because it all ties together. And the music flows in one end and out the other, and it goes through all those pieces. And so if you don't understand how they're connected, if you don't understand the significance of certain stages of that chain, it's going to be really hard to get in there and do good work at improving it. Mm-hmm. That's when you start doing deep dives into that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So you mentioned your mentor, Jeff Cook.
Yeah.
Do you have other mentors along the way, and what were some of your biggest lessons that you learned from them?
Well, I mean, Jeff was my, I think it was probably 68 or 69, so I was like 16 or 17 years old when I started working with Jeff, and he had done PA at some big outdoor festivals, which were in their infancy. That whole outdoor Woodstock kind of festival was in its infancy in the 68, 69 era, and he had a lot of experience at that, and had a lot of gear that he brought back to California. And but he, as I said, he really imparted this thing of listening, and how to listen to stuff, and comparative listening to things. The most important thing is, how does it sound? Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the ability to distinguish subtleties you're not going to be able to distinguish differences between things. Mm-hmm. And if you really, really, really learn how to listen, and you really, really, really develop the skill of critical listening, then you have something to base your design decisions on. And otherwise, you just have a bunch of features, a bunch of knobs and buttons you can twist and push, and hopefully you can hear something that it does, but it's not really, a very educated approach to doing it or informed approach to doing it. They both really instilled that in me because they both really loved to listen to music. And individually and collectively, we would sit for hours and just listen to music. And often not talking about electronics or the designs, but talking about the music, talking about the recording, talking about the experience of listening to it. And that whole concept was really new to me at that time. I was young and I hadn't been educated that way at all. This is, to have that awareness was really, really big. But then you could go way past that with these guys. It's like, okay, well, here's the box. We're going to put it in the system and we're going to listen to music. We're going to take it out of the system and listen to the same music. What did that box do when we put it in there? They're very rigorous about, matching everything level-wise and stuff. And, then it becomes, okay, well, let's take the lid off this thing. What's going on in here? What's in here, first of all? And why would this collection of components impart this sound to the experience of listening? If you've equalized everything else out, level-wise, same levels, but it sounds different. What is causing that? And that's the deep dive into circuit design that those guys could do intuitively. And they could approach it mathematically. They could approach it just with a napkin and a pencil to draw out the schematic. But their intuitive understanding of those circuits went way beyond any mathematical analysis of it. They understood the relationships intuitively inside of those designs. And that's what they sort of imparted to me about designs. That was, well, okay, you've got this and you've got this. You've got a front-end differential amplifier, and then you have an inverter, and then you do the output stage. What would it feel like if you could just stand right there in the circuit? How would that feel to you if you were just able to just inject yourself into the circuit right there while there was music playing? What influences, as that music played, would you be subjected to? It was a really new concept for me, and I was like, wow, that's a great concept. And I, to this day, still try to do that.
So much so that is one of my questions that I had.
Okay. Well, we can go back and revisit. You can just ask the question when you're ready to. But again, those are the mentors, and they were deep dives. They were really. They are. Jeff is still alive. Bascom is not, sadly. But they're both extremely intelligent people and very, very knowledgeable in both the objective side of electronic design and the subjective side of the results of those objective designs. And while I can't really paraphrase them very well, I mean, the basic tenet that Jeff put into me at an early age, and Bascom, when Bascom had his epiphany about designing stuff, largely with Jeff's help, and when Bascom, at an early age, early part of his career, really took off as an incredible designer, was that how things sound can't necessarily be measured. And just because something measures good doesn't mean it's going to sound good. Just because it measures poorly doesn't mean it's going to sound bad. And that's a concept that we won't get into a whole lot here because there's a lot of polarizing positions on that. But Jeff took it a step further, and this was something that I think is really important, and not very many people. I don't think very many designers have this awareness or approach, and that is that the collection of components and the topology of the circuit is one thing. The arrangement, the physical arrangement, with you implement that design, is another. The actual components that you use within that design is another. And the collective of those three things results in something that when music passes through it, it alters the music. It imparts, to use Jeff's terminology, it imparts a vibe on the music. And you cannot measure that. You cannot. It's like trying to measure an emotion or something. You can measure the consequences of the emotion, but you can't measure it.
Yeah.
Your heart rate might go up, your pulse may go up, whatever, or your blood pressure may go up. I don't know.
Uh-huh. Yeah, or we understand neurotransmitters and
Yeah,
whatnot,
yeah.
but like,
and he's just saying, look, it all matters. Everything matters in there because it all imparts a vibe on the music, and what we care about is how the music comes out of that.
Mm-hmm.
These things aren't here just to exist. They're performing a function. We need them to do something. Mm-hmm. And yet it will impart a vibe to the music that's playing through it. And you can't measure. You can't go and take an audio precision and measure the distortion or measure the impulse responses, and you can plot out the harmonic content envelopes on. Mm-hmm. It doesn't correlate. There are certain things that might correlate a little bit, but I think what they do is those things tend to show you that the circuit is well behaved. Mm-hmm. It's stable, under transient operating conditions. And if it's stable under transient operating conditions, there is a chance that it may sound better. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean it will.
Yeah. Hope I didn't lose too many objectivists on that.
Snip it out, man.